Welcome everyone to our first episode of Crafting at Home for Teens. I'm Miss Amanda from the York County Library and I will be guiding you through this craft. The series is mainly going to be focused around easy to make crafts that can be made with basic household items. So for example, markers, paper, glue, and in this craft's case, we're going to be using a Ziploc bag. This is the first episode and we're going to be making watercolor art without watercolor paints. Instead, we're going to be using water-based markers to fill that role. Here's an example of one piece of art that I had created beforehand and made. In this example, I'm going to be showing you today, I will be pressing the piece of paper down to the color versus painting out a design. Of course, you can choose to do that method if you prefer. For my paper today, I'm going to be using a piece of old dictionary paper that was from an old dictionary that unfortunately was falling apart and was going to be thrown away. I decided that I wanted to repurpose it instead and use it for this craft in hopes of getting basically a second life out of it. So for this craft, you're going to need water-based markers. For this example, I'm using Crayola markers. You'll need a cup with some water. You'll need a paintbrush, paper of any sort. Like I said, I'm using this dictionary paper. A Ziploc or plastic cling, just really anything plastic-based, kind of like that. You're also welcome to use optional materials for decorating your art. That can be scissors, a pencil, maybe to sketch out a design, a ruler, things like that. So for step one, I would recommend laying down some newspaper or something to protect your surface, just so you don't stain anything or get any colors or water anywhere. I'm just using this little background here that's gonna keep my area clean. And then once you're done with that, I'm going to slide some of my stuff out of the way real quick. I'm going to take my Ziploc bag here first. And I'm going to lay it out flat on my surface. So this is going to be like my easel for my paint. I'm just going to kind of lay down my colors here. So next you're going to take your markers and you're going to decide what colors you want. I think for today, I'm going to be using these colors. Okay. And so now that I've picked out my colors, what I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to kind of scribble my colors along my plastic here. And you can make it as big or small or as much color in whichever order you'd like. There's really no wrong way to do this part. It's just however much you want. And you can of course scribble more than one color. You can scribble a lot more and have, maybe you want more green in an area, maybe you want more purple in another area. It's really up to you how much color you want. But I'm just going to kind of scribble along randomly. Not really having any order specifically for it. And of course, if you're going to end up using more of the method of using this like watercolor paint and painting from the color here, there isn't really a specific order you have to lay anything down in. You can kind of just work off of this and add more color as you go. Ooh, missing that color. Okay. So I think I have all my colors down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. All right, so from here, we're going to move on to step 2. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our paintbrush and dip it into our water. Tap it off. I don't want it really wet. I want the brush just wet enough to kind of wash up the color here. So kind of like this. And I'm just going to swish it around my markers, kind of make it just a little more liquidy form here. That can be used for paint. And so I always kind of recommend to re-dip your brush and rinse it off once you've done one color, just so you don't really mix up the colors. I mean, you can do that, of course, if you'd like, but if you're not really wanting to mix up the colors and if you're wanting to keep them all very individual, I would say definitely re-dip and then swish it around again. And of course, after you've done all these and you decide if you wanted more, you can definitely scribble down some more color and add to it if needed. But for right now, I think this is enough for what I have intended. All right, let me get this last one here. And if your colors do end up mixing a little, like I did right there with the orange and the purple, that's perfectly fine. I like to think of it as a happy mistake. All right, so I've got that done. Now for our next step, we're going to be taking our paper and I'm going to be laying it down on this color. And since I do have my papers a little bit shorter, I'm going to lay it down in one section and then pick it up in a second and move it over to another section. So it can be done. It can be done in any way. I could do it technically this way. I could do it diagonal. I could do it this way. It's kind of whatever you would prefer. So let me see. I actually think I am going to possibly do it diagonally because I think that's going to cover the most here. So I'm just going to really gently lay it down and just kind of smooth it out. I'm going to be careful of these edges so I don't get this marker on my hand so I can still use that color afterwards. But just kind of smooth down and pick up some of that color that's underneath it. And it's okay if a little bit color comes over, it gets on your fingers. That's perfectly fine. Alrighty, let's see what I've got. So once I've got it pretty much laid down, I'm gonna just kind of lift it up and see how it looks. I like that. And depending on how wet the liquid was, you might have little drops that run off. That is perfectly fine. So I think I'm gonna lay it down this other direction and I'm gonna pick up a little more of that purple and red. And of course, you can always decide, you know, once you laid it down, that can be your one and done. So let me do this. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks good. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to set it to the side here so it's out of the way. And of course, if you end up with a little bit of marker on your hand, it's pretty easy to wash off afterwards. So let me get that there, move that out of the way. Okay, so I'm just gonna fan this real quick. Of course, I recommend that you would let it sit for a couple minutes, let it all dry, but for the sake of time in this video, I'm just gonna fan it and try and get it a little bit drier. And of course, afterwards, you can always decide if you want, you can add some color in. So let me see here. I think I want to add a little more of that red. So I'm going to take some leftover color from my bag. I can kind of just paint on. I think I'll take a little bit of that. Leftover green as well. And this would be more of the method that you would use if you're wanting to use this as watercolor paint. I'm just going to dab in a little bit of hues of green right over here. I'm going to let that dry. Alrighty. And of course, laying it down while it's still wet on the different colors, definitely you'll get a little bit of blending here. So I've got kind of my purple and my green blended down here, and it looks more like my blue and my red kind of blended up there from laying it in the different directions. Okay. I think this is dry enough. There's a couple spots that are a little wet still, but that is okay. So lastly, for our final step, what we're going to be doing is just kind of adding a design. So you can choose to add a design, or you can just leave it like this and call it done. But for this example, I'm going to be writing out a quote and making a little design. You will want to wait till the paper is completely dry for this, but for the sake of my display, I'm going to just go ahead and move on from here. All right. And of course, this is one of many ways you can make this craft. You can always draw out something, you could just write out a quote, you could doodle in things, you could cut shapes out of this. That's why I always say that the markers and the scissors and the rulers are optional. This craft can be done in many ways though, which is great because it means that the designs and the ideas for this can be endless. So let me start. I think since I have a lot of color here and I really like the color, I'm going to do a really nice rainbow quote. So I'm going to start off by drawing my rainbow. Let me start with my purple first. I actually think I'm going to use my ruler for this to kind of center it. If you mess up a little, that's perfectly fine. There is no right or wrong way to do this. See if I can fit it all. Since this is a little bit thinner paper than I'm used to using. I usually use a nice square shape. Gives me a little bit more room to play around with. Yellow. And of course, certain colors will probably not show up as well. Like my yellow's not really showing up really great there, but that's okay. Just gonna make it work. Okay. And lastly is red. And since red is not quite gonna fit, I'm just gonna kind of go for my outer edges and kind of make it seem like it's just gone off the page. There. Okay. Put that there. I think I'm gonna add some clouds to the bottom with a black marker, and then I'm gonna add in my quote. So kind of I think I like that. Okay. Is that, and then let me write out my quote. And of course it did end up bleeding a little, which is fine. You'll get a bit of that if your paper is still wet, which is why I do highly recommend that you wait until it's completely dry before drawing anything. But that's perfectly fine. I think it still turned out really, really great. So yeah, This is a very easy craft to make, and it shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes depending on how much color you want to add or how big your paper is. And of course, adding designs like I did and doing quotes will of course add to that time. So it's definitely however long you want to spend on your piece. This is our craft for our first episode. I hope that you enjoyed it and will try it out for yourself at home. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you will join us again next month for our next episode. In the meantime, be sure to check out the other cool videos on the York County YouTube page, as well as see what's going up for programs on our website, yclibrary.org. See you next time. Bye-bye.